Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm really excited to share with you some of the things I've learned being kind of a newbie to fixed wing FPV drones and using iNav, and some of the key things that I kind of think aren't covered by a lot of other YouTubers. There's some great YouTubers and I learned a ton from them, and I'll mention them in my description. Shout out to them. But I want to cover some very specific details: Walksnail OSD, the SneakyFPV tool, kind of my experience when I actually lost my video signal in this video, and you'll see the return to home setup, some things like that. But first, the Walksnail OSD. Basically, the Walksnail digital system records two separate files, and you can't use that OSD file in a video editor, so you have to post-process it with some tool, and Caddx FPV does not provide you a tool to combine the OSD with the video. So there's several free ones out there, and they do a halfway decent job. They'll try to keep the OSD in sync with the video, but what happens is that they get desynced. And the SneakyFPV overlay tool is the only one that I've found that allows me to produce a video that's just the OSD. And that's what I want, because then you can pull just the OSD into your video editor as a separate timeline from the video itself, and you can make adjustments for things getting out of sync. But let me explain why it gets out of sync. When you start to lose signal or lose a few frames, it will get gaps in there, and and Caddx needs to fix this in the Walksnail system. They need to make some changes to try to get things back in sync. So unless you're recording your HDMI output, you're going to need something like SneakyFPV, and it allows you the option of doing just the OSD, and that's what that little drop-down menu is there in the SneakyFPV tool. Transparent overlay only, or you can produce it with the actual video. But the problem is the amount of off shift is never exactly the same. It depends upon how much signal you've lost during the time, and you'll see up here I actually do completely lose video for about 8 seconds and have to do a return to home. And that's the other big topic that we'll be talking about too, is the return to home setup in iNav, which is pretty darn important. And that little blurb there that came on the screen is about an experience I had in a previous flight. When I first set up return to home, I set it up for the mode that's called backtracking. And what in post-processing, looking at the video, basically the backtracking failed me. It flew my plane into the ground when it got back to the home point. And I don't know exactly why that is, although I could tell from the video that the flight controller completely froze. The OSD froze. There was no new data for about 3.5 seconds when it flew into the ground, and I couldn't take it out of return to home mode with the radio button I have on my screen. You definitely want to put a return to home button on your screen, because that's how I invoked return to home to do the testing. And how I did it here in this video on this flight as well was when I lost a video. It's not a fail-safe, right? That's a video fail-safe. You got to push that button on your radio, and then it invokes the return to home behavior. So anyway, the flight controller locked up, and I have some theories as to what could be bugs in the iNav code, but I'm not a programmer there, so I don't know for sure. But yeah, like I said, when it did the backtracking perfectly. I mean, it flew back, but as soon as it got over the home point, the whole OSD just froze, and I couldn't take it out of return to home, and I just watched my plane go. I was at about 98 feet, so it wasn't, and it's an attestment to this AtomRc Swordfish too, because it broke the wing spar, but the wings came off, and there was a tiny crack in the nose foam, but other than that, it was totally salvageable. I just had to buy a new carbon fiber spar, wing spar, and then, you know, here I am back in the air. But anyway, I recommend do not use the backtrack method. I went back to the return to home method that's called at least, and it's at least altitude or at the current altitude you're at. And that's what I have here. And I have it spiral up. There's a lot of settings in iNav for your return to home, but spend time on it because it's important. I think I have it spiral up to 350. We'll see here in a second, because I actually don't remember what my altitude was at the time that I lost video, which is coming up real soon here. But I have it spiral up, and that was the other thing I want to point out. See there, you can see my bit rate is dropping a little bit, but I wasn't really losing, it wasn't fuzzing out on me or anything like that. It was kind of a sudden thing, like boom, like pretty much right there. See how the bit rate dropped to 0.1, and my screen actually turned black. So there can be little to no warning, just heads up. And I'm back there, and that further away clearing that you see is where I'm on the ground. But you cannot, I was kind of behind those trees, but I was kind of surprised that, you know, being just a little over a half mile with just a little bit of trees in the way there, now I can barely see my truck down there, because that's where I'm at on that little road that goes to a cul-de-sac. But yeah, I definitely stay away from the backtracking method. Put a return to home button on your radio. Now here, beginning linear descent, that's one of the options for the return to home. And I have a linear descent at a certain distance from home, and I think it was like somewhere around 1,000 feet or so. And then it's supposed to loiter around home. That's what it does. It does it correctly with this setup, loitering around home. But when I had it on backtracking, it never got to that step, loitering around home. Instead, it just froze and it flew the plane in the ground, man. It was scary. But yeah, so that's two of the really big topics that I wanted to cover. And so now pretty much spend the rest of the video talking about telemetry. And if you don't know what telemetry is, it's basically it's metrics and data about what's happening with the flight controller, altitude, speed, what is the voltage of your battery, all of this stuff that you can actually see on the OSD here, and much more. But here's my recommendation, is that if you have an EdgeTX radio, that you get that telemetry sent back down to your receiver, and you can have your radio do voice alerts to you. There's so much information on the screen here, it's easy. Like right here, I was headed out toward this ridge, and I wanted to get out right around 1 mile. And I accidentally went over 400 feet, just briefly. But I had a special function set up on my EdgeTX radio to alert me, and it called out too high. And it was like, yeah, sure enough, I was paying attention to my radio signal strength, which is in that upper left corner And here I turned around, it hit 50 milliwatts. That's no big deal. The upper left corner. And then I'm also focused on the video, which is that very bottom, the bit rate, 25 megabits, and the latency. Those are the two things I'm focusing on to see if there's limits to the range. You know, just in a short, to me, 1 mile is not any big deal, but as we saw in that last test there, if you've got stuff, trees in the way, yeah, it can be a big deal. But anyway, I'm flying back, and then I'm going to fly back out there, and I got above 400 feet, but I have an alert that tells me that I was too high. So I immediately corrected that. And there's, there's the battery voltage. There's critical things that you want to know about. And from flying drones, from flying multirotors, I had just the bare minimum critical stuff like radio link, because there isn't a whole lot. I never flew long range with multirotors at all. And but there's certain things you want there as well, and I had voice alerts. But there's so much more with fixed wing. Like, I have a voice prompt for every single mode. Here's all the common telemetry. If you do a search on internet for common telemetry sensors, you'll get that list. But on your EdgeTX radio, you can fire up and get the live sensors that are actually available. That's what the Discover New in the lower left of your radio does. And then it gives you a list of all those. But if you do that search for common telemetry, it'll describe what they are. So like the voltage of your battery, the amount of the link quality of your radio. Those are the kinds of things that I wanted to alert on. And so what you can do is set up what's called logical switches on EdgeTX. And I'm not going to go into detail on how you do that, but here's the screen on my radio. And I've got 7 logical switches. Receiver link quality, if it's below 50% for at least 2 seconds, then this switch is triggered. And then there's another page which is special functions that you choose what you want it to, what sound you want it to do, or what voice you want to play back. The next one is when my transmitter power changes either up or down by 100 milliwatts. That's what this absolute value of delta means, if it's greater than 100 for at least 1 second. Then it'll voice out the value. And altitude, 121 meters is 400 feet, and that actually worked for me. It was fantastic. Battery percentage, and this is one thing that in this flight, I'll talk about more on at the end, is the percentage of my battery is incorrect because I needed to adjust the iNav settings for a lithium ion. Here I'm going to the screen, the next screen over in EdgeTX is a special function. So what this says is like when logical switch 3 goes off, play the track too high. So let me give you an example while we have, I'm gonna turn my radio on right now just to give you an example of what some of the voice things sound like. So like I have a voice prompt for every single mode.
Horizon mode, manual mode, return to home, heading lock, cruise, acro mode, loiter.
So yeah, when you have your face in the goggles and you're flipping the switches and trying to remember, make sure that you got the right switch, it's really nice to have a positive feedback even for just that reason. But yeah, so those are all my logical switches. And, so now I'm flying back to land, and here is where, see how it's flashing my battery voltage. Now the reason there was a gap there in that was I was trying to sync up in my post-processing the gap in the Walksnail OSD. But anyway, so I have a 5,000 milliamp battery in there, so this is way off. I mean, I can go, I think it had the minimum voltage was 3.2 volts per cell, but this Lion pack, the minimum voltage can be 2.5. And so I've adjusted it to be 3.0 volts per cell. So it was alarming way too early. And I believe that's in the configuration tab of iNav, where all these power settings are, but that's really crucial. Like, you don't want to overfly your battery, right? So, and yeah, there I am, coming in for a landing. It kind of had me a little bit flustered. It was telling me to land and everything, and I knew this was wrong, but I was worried. Like, once the alerts go off, then you're not going to get a proper alert later. So I decided I'd just go ahead and land, since I already was at almost 15 minutes of flight. It was a fantastic flight, so much learned. But yeah, and hopefully I'll have some more scenic and interesting videos in the future, because I want to fly up on some of these ridges that are more toward my backyard, and there's not a lot of trees directly in the way. So if I basically fly you can go the 400 feet above ground level is the FAA. It's not 400 feet total altitude, it's 400 feet above ground level. So I could basically follow the terrain up there and still be legal. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.